Welcome to Rico 12. I'm Justin B., your host, and a child of an all-powerful and perfectly loving God, and an addict living in the miracle of one day at a time recovery. Rico 12 is an open to all addictions and afflictions organization dedicated to exploring the common threads of the differing manifestations of alcoholism, sharing tools and offering hope from those walking a similar path. We gather from diverse backgrounds, faiths, and locations to learn and support one another. Our speakers come from various fellowships and experiences, demonstrating the universal principles of recovery. Rico 12 is not allied or affiliated with any specific 12-step fellowship. This is Rico 12 speaker meeting number 388. How cool is that? Thank you for joining us live or on the recording later. And I also wanted to thank all of you for your thoughts and prayers last week. I did have to cancel our live meeting last week due to the premature and unexpected birth of my granddaughter. So my wife and I went out to help out with our kids and our other grandkid. Little Isabel is progressing well, and we are hoping that she will be able to come home in about 2 weeks. And we're excited about that. Today's speaker is Jenn T, a first-time Rico 12 speaker. Her talk today is entitled, Having Had a Spiritual Awakening. I look forward to hearing more about this message here in a few minutes, but first, a few quick announcements. Rico 12 offers a variety of recovery resources, including podcasts and social media communities. To explore more, visit us at www.rico12.com. That's RECO12.com, or check out the chat and show notes for links. And we are still seeking some speakers, a couple for the rest of this year, but starting to move into first quarter of next year. So if you or somebody you know has something that's just weighing on your heart, I need to talk about this, reach out to me. Send me an email at rico12pod@gmail.com. I'll put that in the chat so you can find it there. It's also in the show notes of the podcast. Rico 12 is self-supporting, and your contributions help us continue this message. Thank you to all our Spearhead donors, past and present. The last 2 weeks, I want to send a special thank you to our Patreons, also to Katharina and Abigail for your generous support. If you feel your higher power nudging you to make a contribution to Rico 12, you can figure out how to do that in the show notes, also in the podcast, in the chat of the live meeting. Go to rico12.com/support. Your support, both financially and by word of mouth, truly makes a difference in helping us share these messages of hope and recovery. Each week, we receive light and inspiration from our speakers. Their experience brings hope, meaning, worth, and growth to each of us as listeners. Now I'm going to welcome today's guest speaker, Jenn T, and here's a little bit about her. Jenn T is from Stoney Creek, Ontario. Her home group is Morning Hope AFG in Burlington. Jenn is a grateful member of Al-Anon for 7 years, and for the past 5 years, she has been involved with a step study, taking people through the steps using the Big Book from the perspective of an Al-Anonic and the spiritual malady. Take it away, Jenn. The floor is
awesome. Thanks so much, Justin. I'm really happy to be here, grateful for the opportunity to be of service, and thank you so much to you for your service to all of the 12-step recovery communities. Just it's amazing to be here. I am, as Justin said, I am also a loving and loved child of my higher power, who I call God. A grateful member of the Worldwide Fellowship of Al-Anon. My home group is the Morning Hope Al-Anon Family Group in Burlington, Ontario, Tuesday mornings at 10 a.m. If you're anywhere near the GTA, come see us. And my name is Jenn, and I'm happy to be here. When Justin asked me to pick a topic, I struggle sometimes to pick a topic. It's much easier for me when somebody just says, go speak on this, and great. But the topic that came to my mind and my heart and my spirit was having had a spiritual awakening. Because for me, what this program, what these steps, what a loving God of my own understanding, and more importantly, a loving God of my own experience has given me is a spiritual awakening. And I look at that in a couple of ways. I look at that, one, that my spirit has been awakened, but two, that I have been awakened to a spirit, something greater than me. And so I just wanted to talk a bit about what that looks like, about how that happened, and about what that looks like. When I came into these rooms, I had been the beneficiary of some wonderful deep recovery with an AA fellowship, not because I am in AA or at this stage belong in AA, but because my partner and my child, who we grant each other spiritual license if it's going to be helpful to speak of one another in our recovery. But they are in that fellowship, and that fellowship warmly accepted me and to their open meetings. And that's a wonderful thing for anybody who is in Al-Anon or any other. Attending open meetings, especially of AA, I think is a wonderful way to learn about the disease of addiction, of alcoholism. Um, Hearing the stories that I had personalized. I personalized the disease. My loved ones drank at me or because of me, or whatever it was. But attending open AA meetings was tremendously helpful, and that was part of the awakening. Was, gosh, this disease, it isn't personal. This disease, it picks people at random. It doesn't, my idea of what an alcoholic was is not my idea of what an alcoholic is today. But it also showed me, I would sit in these rooms, I'd sit in AA long before I ever came into Al-Anon. And I would think, my God, I'm pretty sure I'm an alcoholic. I don't have a problem with alcohol, but I am pretty sure I'm an alcoholic, because everything other than the drinking really resonated with me. And part of my awakening in my recovery is the recognition that I too suffer from the family disease of alcoholism. I just don't treat mine with alcohol. I don't treat it with the drug. I treat it with control. And that's what that looks like for me. I often will say you dry up a drunk, and what you have is an untreated Al-Anon, right? Without another solution, because what you're left with is the spiritual malady, right? And that malady is what the solution of the 12 steps to me is about, is sort of the fix to. And so for me, I came into these rooms, I came into Al-Anon. I had the opportunity to work the steps before I ever landed in Al-Anon. And I had been taken through the big book with a couple of friends in AA. And it changed my life. Going through that work opened my eyes to so much. And for me, what that looked like, these different sort of realizations, awarenesses, awakenings, for me looked like, doing a fourth step and coming to recognize where I had played the victim my whole life. I had been the victim of you and your poor choices. I didn't ever really take ownership of anything. And that victimhood I used to wear like a cloak, even from the time I was young. But as an adult, it was very easy to sit in victimhood, because what it meant was I never had to take responsibility for myself. I could just always point a finger and blame. And so, being awakened to the fact that was out there, and that was a part of me, not necessarily something I was really excited to find out about myself, but it was true, whether I had seen it or not. And that was, a big thing for me, was working these steps. And you'd hear people, the 4 steps, you just want to avoid the 4th step, and the 9th step where we make amends, worst steps. For me, I didn't really have that fear of the steps, of those steps in particular, once I sort of started going through the steps in a deep and broad way. Because what it showed me was these things, all of this stuff that I'm hiding in the corner, or that is hidden from me because I haven't sought to be aware of it. All of that stuff exists. I'm the only one who isn't aware of it. If you wanted to know what my defects were, it would have been just easy to ask somebody that I was intimately involved with, because they certainly could have told you what my defects were. I'm the only one who wasn't aware of them. I'm the only one who wasn't aware that, we use the word people pleaser often in the rooms. And there's a wonderful friend in AA who will say, "Oh yeah, you want to see how pleased all the people are? Please line them up against the wall and ask them how pleased they are with your people pleasing." And for me, that turned out, yeah, I hadn't pleased that many people, because it wasn't, as it turns out, about pleasing other people. It was about easing my own dis-ease. If I was uncomfortable, everything about me said, it needs to be fixed. It needs to be fixed now, and it needs to be fixed by you, which meant by you, right? I would be okay when you did what I needed you to do, or when you stopped doing what I didn't want you to do. And and that's all well and good. That works wonderfully, provided everybody aligns with that script that you're writing. The challenge for me was I changed the script without even me recognizing I changed the script, which meant you certainly didn't recognize that I changed the script, which meant you were never, ever going to be powerful enough to make me okay. Right. And that's part of this awakening that the steps and God, who I struggled with. I struggled with the G word. I liked the F word a whole lot. Wasn't a big fan of the G word. Um, but these steps, step 2, I just needed to have a little bit of willingness to move forward, which is really all I had. Um, and for me, it's why I say, a God of my own understanding was important. I had a God of my own understanding before I came into these rooms, and that God of my own understanding was a result of somebody else's understanding of God. What these steps brought about for me, the awakening, was I have a personal God, and that has nothing to do with your understanding of God. It has to do with my experience of God. And thank God for God. Thank God for these steps, because I don't know that I ever would have gotten there. I don't know that I ever would have sought out a personal experience with God, because what I failed to recognize was I thought I was God. And that was certainly how I acted. I acted like that in my life. I knew all of the shoulds. My first sponsor gave me a wonderful gift. She said, "Stop shoulding all over yourself and everybody else." And I try to do that. I try not to use should in my thoughts and my words. Doesn't happen, it happens less often now, but I still find myself, well, that shouldn't be, or they should be doing this, or you should be, especially around recovery. But, I struggled with God, and I thought God should look a certain way. Working these steps, God has presented to me in ways that I never would have expected. God, I don't hear God, the way that I would have thought I would hear God, some booming voice, gray bearded guy on a throne in the sky. God most often sounds like you, because God speaks to me through you, because that's who I'm involved with on every given day. Sometimes God sounds like me, and I find that out when I'm talking to a sponsee, as an example. And my goodness, I'm a great sponsor. I can say that, because I can take all of my crazy, all of my disease, and I can hear what you're saying and think, well, I think I know how they're feeling, or I know the flip side of how they're feeling. And I know enough about recovery to know what, my considerations to you would be. And often when that happens, I go, okay, God, so you're using me to get to me. Because so often I'll say, yeah, here's my consideration to you, sponsee. All the while God's going, hope you're listening, Jenn, because it's also my consideration to you. And that's the beauty of, for me, 12-step work, is we work with other people, and my sponsees all the time, oh, you help me so much. Joke's on them, because they help me far more than I think I could ever help them. It keeps me very involved in my recovery. It keeps me eyeballs deep in the middle of the steps or the traditions or the concepts, which is wonderful, because what that means is it keeps me close to God. And I need to stay close to God. That's again one of my big awakenings, is how little I had God in my life. I didn't really want God, because my understanding of God at that point was a punishing, punitive God. And I couldn't get down with that. I really struggled with a power greater than me, who would take somebody's life or who would rob somebody of something. And that was my perspective of it. That's not, how it was presented necessarily, but how I received it. The God that these steps and this work and my sponsor and my sponsees and just working in 12-step recovery, the God that I've come to experience isn't a punishing God at all. It's a God who I believe would never see me suffer. And that's one of my awakenings, is that any time that I'm suffering, it's because of me, right? That's, we have all these paradox in 12-step recovery. The problem is me. If I am disturbed, the problem is me. That's absolutely the case. And that circles back to the importance for me of, these open AA meetings, because I personalize everything. I make things about me when they have nothing to do with me. The flip side of that is I make things about you when they actually are about me. I fail to recognize what is and isn't actually my responsibility in my disease. And one of the things that, I've awakened to is that I am always serving something. I am serving a master. It's either my disease or it's God. It's one or the other. There's no in between for me. And I can vacillate on any given day between, serving my disease and serving my God. I'm better at seeing it these days, I think. Although maybe you should ask anybody in my intimate circle, they'll tell you. But generally speaking, I think I'm better at recognizing my disease. And that is a huge part of doing a deep and broad, 4th and 5th step, and work in 6 and 7 and 8 and 9, and on an ongoing basis, 10, 11, 12. It's important for me to have a sponsor who knows me, and she knows me, because I talk to her. She knows she's my sponsor because I'm regularly in contact with her. But she knows everything about me because it is a relationship where trust has been built, where I'm able to open up to her so that she can call me out on my stuff. Because one of the things I've been awakened to is the fact that my disease is cunning, baffling, and powerful. My disease is never gone. It's lying in wait, doing push-ups in the corner. And what that looks like for me is, I'll make everything into a competition. I need to be better than, or I am worse than. I need to take the W. I will never take the L. I will never be the loser in any situation. I'm always going to be the winner. Whether you agree with that or not, irrelevant. But, and God's not all that interested in my life, in seeing me as a winner or a loser.
Got questions about addiction, recovery, or just life in general? Let's noodle it out together. Grab your big book, a pen, a highlighter, and a notepad, and join Nikki M and me, Justin B, on Rico 12 Noodle It Out with Nikki M. Each episode, we take real-life questions, ours, yours, and those from the recovery community, and dig deep into the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous to find real, practical solutions. So, if you're ready to do the work and apply the solution, tune in to Noodle It Out with Nikki M, streaming now on your favorite podcast platform.
And I think God would rather I have the humility to just be on even par with anybody. Not need to be better than, not need to feel less than, not seek that out in other people. And that helps when I am with God. That helps me in terms of my judgment of others, because one of my great defects is this natural inclination to judge, to think I know all of the shoulds. You should. Good moms should. Good dads should. A good partner should. A good gas station attendant should, et cetera, right? And so part of what God helps me to do is set aside what I think I know, all of those shoulds. I watch for them. It's part of my 10th step as I go through my day. And then I seek God. The awakening for me, this different perspective in my life, has been amazing. And it's many perspectives, but the basic perspective is that there is more than I am on my own able to see about any given situation, about me, about you, about what's going on here, about the shoulds, etc. And that has been truly life-changing. You know, the big book references an entire psychic change. And for me, that has absolutely wholeheartedly been the case. You know, the not only the ability for me to find a different perspective, but the willingness in me to seek a different perspective. You know, when I'm struggling with something, to seek a different perspective. One of the gifts that I have found in recovery is the wholehearted belief, faith, I suppose, that at any point in time, God is trying to show me something. I think in anything that I run into, there is always a lesson and there is a gift, and my job is to seek to find those. You know, often the lessons are something about me, something about my disease, something about my ego showing up and the selfishness and self-centeredness, something about how fear-driven I am. You know, the gift is often, you know, what God would have me be instead of what my disease tells me I should be, right? And a great example, and this doesn't really have anything to do with alcohol or the alcoholic. It may have to do with alcoholism and what that looks like in an Al-Anon or a dry person. But, you know, with my kids, I have adult kids, I have grandbabies, and Justin, congratulations on yours. They're the greatest, the greatest gift, the light of my life. But, you know, I'm a parent to these adult children. They don't need me looking over their shoulder as if they were 6 years old doing, you know, their spelling homework anymore. That's not my job in their life. And yet my disease, driven by 100 forms of fear, will have me think that is the solution. You know, my child makes a decision about a relationship that I look and say, well, I know exactly what this is going to look like. I know how this is going to turn out. And you shouldn't do that. And let me tell you all of the reasons why. And I'll have a whole, you know, justification and defense for my angle on this. But what, you know, one of the awakenings again in recovery is that I tend to do that. In my disease, I tend to think it is my job to I was going to say help. Another word is control. You know, we'll call it help just for fun. Insert myself into somebody else's life, uninvited. Uninvited. They haven't asked me for my opinion. They haven't asked me for my advice. And yet my disease tells me that's what I need to do. And on the surface, it tells me it's what I need to do for them, right? I'm just helping them. I'm pleasing them. What I've been awakened to now is it's almost never about them. It's almost always about the fact that I am disturbed and they are my solution. So in the moment, I'm disturbed by the idea of this relationship. So I'm going to try and convince you why the relationship is bad for you. I'm not mentioning that it's bad for me, because sometimes I fail to recognize that's why I'm actually doing this. It's bad for you. And here's all of the reasons you should listen. Like, these are my experiences with relationships. And let me tell you the statistics that I read about after I searched for an hour on the internet as to why this relationship wasn't going to be good for you, and so on and so forth, right? And in that moment, if I am separated from God, I truly, wholeheartedly believe I'm being a good mom, a helpful mom. I'm just helping you. What I've failed to recognize is I'm none of those things, because a good mom doesn't insert herself into somebody's business uninvited. A good mom loves her children regardless of what they are doing in their life. And so for me, I recognize now how often that sort of help that I thought was so much a part of my job rarely is about the other person. It's almost always about quieting my fear, quieting my disease. When I'm with God, and I'm with God when I'm actively practicing my program of recovery. And that looks like, doing things in the morning, like prayer and meditation, going back through my nightly inventory from the night before to see what today, do I owe amends? Is there anything that I have not spoken to somebody about that I need to speak to about? What did my selfishness and dishonesty look like yesterday, et cetera, so that I can better watch for that today. I can get with God. And that's the stuff in the morning. I do similar stuff at night. I do an inventory where I look to see what my day looked like. And it's a wonderful thing. I used to look at it and think like, it's a lot at night. I just want to be able to lay down and go to sleep, or I just want to be able to sit. None take me long, but it's such a wonderful way for me to ensure that I remain connected to God. And the big book talks about this. I think it's 84 and the on awakening, but then it also talks about as we go through our day. And that to me is step 10, this huge piece. It really is the design for living. It's step 10 to me is all of the steps all in one, because what it's about is me recognizing the exact nature of my wrongs by leveraging my disease, this disturbance that regularly comes up in me, my dis-ease with you or a situation or me or my feelings or whatever it is, and I have a choice in that moment. And this is the only place for me where I find I have a choice. I can serve the master that is that disease. I can serve the fear. I can serve the resentment. I can serve the anger. I can serve whatever that is. Or I can make a choice in that moment and just follow what the steps ask me to do. I mean, in step 10, for me, that looks like, as I continue to watch my disease, what do? I follow these simple instructions. I ask God at once to remove it. It used to look like, please help my partner see what an idiot he's being and remove that. Well, that's not to me now what step 10 looks like. What it looks like is, God, please help me to see the truth around this, because I recognize my disease is fully at play here, or God, please clear my mind of this judgment that's obviously going on so that I can see him through your eyes. I'm checking in with God. I'm then asked to tell somebody else about it. And I do that regularly. Why? Because my disease thinks that I can figure it out. And recovery isn't about figuring anything out. It would be wonderful if it was, because I'm a fairly smart cookie, I think. If I could throw logic at a disease as illogical as alcoholism, I'd be golden. I also wouldn't be standing here talking to you, because I never would have needed to be in these rooms. If my intellect could have solved my problem with alcoholism, we'd be fine. But we're not. And so I have to watch for where I'm trying to think my way in or out of something to do with my disease. And that to me is that second part of step 10, the humility to admit the exact nature of my wrongs to somebody else. So instead of calling somebody and just dumping, I'm so angry, what an idiot, it now more often, that sometimes still happens, I'm going to call it what it is, sometimes still happens that way, but more often than not now, it looks like I'm angry, and I'm angry because I am refusing to consider his perspective, or I'm angry because I am refusing to cede control. I'm failing to recognize that I am powerless right now over my emotions, over what he is or isn't doing, over what I think should happen, et cetera, et cetera. Then I'm asked to make amends, which one of the awakenings is I can actually admit that I am wrong. And it doesn't mean that I am a terrible human being. I used to have this thing where I couldn't say I was sorry. I couldn't admit that I was wrong, because part of what my disease told me was perfection made me safe. If you saw me as perfect, then you couldn't question anything about me. The problem with that was it built walls around me. And for me, what God has done through these steps is build bridges, and I love bridges now, not walls. So I'm much more I am much more readily willing to admit that I am wrong. And sometimes that looks like me admitting to somebody else. But most of the time, that looks like me admitting to me and to God that I'm wrong. Because it's not just about admitting when I have acted in a wrong way, it's also about admitting where my thinking is still sick. So, I admit to somebody that I'm wrong if I need to. I make amends if I need to. And then the last part, I resolutely turn my thoughts to how I can help somebody else. And that is huge because it is a program of action. It's not just about calling somebody and dumping on them and then waiting for God to shove a magic wand up my backside and make everything okay. That's not how this works, or at least it's not how it works for me. If it's how it works for you, DM me because I'd love to know how that happens. I like the easier, softer route, but that's not the case. And so for me, working these steps, all 12 of them. And that's the thing. It's not just picking and choosing this a la carte program of recovery. I work all 12. I don't want to every day, but I do because I need to. It has changed my life. It has brought about a spiritual awakening for me, many spiritual awakenings for me that have changed my life. And the greatest one before I close is, for me, the absolute knowledge and faith that I am okay even when it doesn't feel okay. That feeling that it's not okay is when I am not with God. Because when I am with God, it's always okay. It doesn't mean I like it, doesn't mean it's comfortable for me necessarily, but I have been awakened to the fact that I am always okay when I am under the protection of God. And that God is not me, not named Jenn. So thank you, Justin. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for doing this, for all of the circles of recovery. Just remarkable. And I'm looking forward to hearing the shares and being here with all of you.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Jenn. I really appreciate your share there. I wrote down a whole bunch of questions that I've got. A reminder to our live audience, if you have a question for Jenn, please type it in the chat. If you want to remain anonymous and not have me read your first name, type that in, say anonymous, please, or direct message me that question, and we'll get to those questions as we go along. The place I want to go first with you on this is you talked about helping someone is control. My sponsor tells me when I say, I'm just trying to be helpful, he says, just trying to be helpful is the sunny side of control. So one of our purposes in the big book is to be helpful. Is it helpful? Fit ourselves to be of service to others. How do you experience the difference between I'm just trying to be helpful and actually being helpful? Hey, Spearheads, if you're looking to dive deeper into the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous with people who live the solution, then you won't want to miss RICO 12 Big Book Roundtable. Join David G., Nikki M., and me, the moderator Justin B., 3 recovered addicts from multiple fellowships, as we break down the big book line by line. In each 30-minute episode, we share our experience, strength, and hope in a real, raw, and practical roundtable discussion. So, if you are ready to learn and apply what you learn, tune in to RICO 12 Big Book Roundtable on your favorite podcast platform.
Thanks, Justin. That's a great question. For me, it really is about an awareness of my disease and asking God, knowledge of God's will for me and the power to carry it out. And sometimes that looks like asking the person what's helpful, because I never used to do that. I never used to say, what can I do that would be useful? Or what can I do that would be helpful? I would just go ahead and decide what was helpful. And there's a big difference for me now in recovery about what I believe is helpful. What used to seem helpful was always to get into the middle of it so that I could return to a place of comfort. Now it's about asking God or asking the other person what might be helpful to them. And then checking with God to see if I can and will do that, because sometimes the request from somebody is something that I can't or won't do. But more often now, it's about asking God to show me what's helpful. And for me, if it's aligned with my principles, typically it's something that's helpful. If it's not aligned with my principles, typically it's not.
Let's pause there for just a minute on that. I love what you said, Jen. If it's not aligned with my principles, it's not there. Have your principles shifted over the last 7 years that you've been, well, even longer, that you've been in the rooms? And how have those principles shifted so that you can say these are my principles, but they've changed?
For sure. I mean, I can tell you, I'll use honesty, which for me is what step one is about, right? Becoming constitutionally honest with myself. I would have said I was a completely honest person. I rarely lie to people. Of course, that was in fact a lie, because I was lying to myself, right? And so I would have said, yeah, I'm honest. I'm going to tell you, Justin, I think you're a jerk today. I think you're just being a complete jerk. I'm just being honest, right? And I would say, like, I'm just being honest. That looks very different to me now, because for me, being honest looks like first getting honest with myself, getting honest with God, and then I have the capability to be honest with you, which sometimes looks like me not even opening my mouth, right? Whereas before, honesty never involved getting honest with myself and getting honest with God. It involved, how do I feel? And I'm going to let you know that in an honest way. So yeah, that's one example of how they've changed. They've changed substantially. Acting with integrity looks really different. I always thought, people should act with integrity toward me. Now I recognize it's my job to act with integrity toward God and myself, so I can then act with integrity toward other people. So yeah, it's changed a whole lot, in part sort of the logistics of what that lineup of my principles looks like, serving God, serving me so that I can serve you. And how it's actually applied when I'm out there in the world, for sure. Big
Yeah,
changes.
I love that. And you said, I would react, or I would be honest based on how I felt, what I was feeling. And earlier, or towards the end of your share, you talked about, what, I'm now okay when things aren't apparently okay. So there's a difference there. I may feel not okay, but I can still tap in and act in integrity. Talk through that just a little bit more. I see you nodding your head that makes sense. It's just barely starting to scratch the surface for me.
Yeah. So for me, I recognize where, if I am in my disease, I truly do serve my feelings, right? However I am feeling, if I am uncomfortable with anything, it means it must change. I am not meant to sit in discomfort. I am not meant to be unhappy. What do you want to be when you grow up? Happy. And it's like, now, what do I want to be when I grow up? Serene. I want to be serene, because for me, serenity leads to happiness. Self-care as a great example. I used to, self-care, go have a bubble bath. Well, I could go and have a bubble bath. I'd be angry with my partner. I would be stewing, literally and figuratively, in my own disease in my bath. Self-care now looks like I get with God because I have a program of recovery. I work those steps. And then I could go and enjoy a bath where I'm not stewing in resentment in my bath, right? So, for me, I don't know, it is all about a discipline to these steps so that I can get with God, so that I can be okay. Because it's big book talks about life on life's terms. Life can be hard. Like we've got a bunch of financial stuff going on that I never would have hoped for in any way, shape, or form in my life. Health stuff. I'm going to be 55 next month and rapidly falling apart physically at a far greater pace than I would ever want. And all of these things that are going on that I would not have chosen in my life. that if you asked me, I would say it's not how it should be. The difference for me in recovery is this surrender to, but it is how it is. It is how it is. And so rather than fighting it, let me get with God to see what my next step is. What am I meant to be here? And I used to ask, God, what would you have me do? But more often now it's, what would you have me be? Because if I am being who God would have me be, who God knows I can be, then whatever I do, I'm okay. And so for me, when I am being that person who, God is the great reality deep within me, then I am always okay, even though it doesn't feel okay. And a lot of the time, life doesn't feel okay, all of those shoulds. But with God, it always is. God gives me the strength to get through difficult things. God gives me the hope to get through things that feel hopeless. And that is, it's everything. It's massive, but it's everything for me because it changes everything. Anything that is a big deal in my life doesn't need to be a big deal in my life. And my disease makes a big deal out of everything. God rarely makes a big deal of anything. And so when I can link into that power, it is truly life-changing. At least for me, it certainly has been.
And that's beautiful. And that just goes along with a phrase that I've heard fairly recently, that really helps me in those situations where it's like, things aren't exactly how I think they should be. But if I step back and look at it, I see that God has provided sufficient for my needs in that moment, whether it be sufficient money, sufficient food, sufficient hope, sufficient whatever it is. And I love that concept that if I'm on God's errand, if I'm doing what I feel God wants me to be, if I'm being who I think God wants me to be, sufficient is provided, and I can have a semblance of serenity in that moment. And I love that. Thank you for diving down this little rabbit hole here on that first question. I think those follow-ups were really helpful for me. I hope they were helpful for others. We've got a question from our live audience from Sean. Sean says, I struggle at times knowing whether I'm acting in my will or God's will. How do you check yourself on that?
Great question, Sean. I struggle too. It's not always clear to me. More often than not, it is now, praying only for knowledge of God's will for us and the power to carry it out. For me, more often than not now, I have knowledge of what God's will for me is. I still am lacking the power, right? And that's the challenge for me. But, to me, it often is about my feeling of serenity. And this is what I mean by I don't necessarily have to like it to recognize that it's God's will. I can want to meddle in my kid's life as an example. I can still look at that and say, but that's what, that's what feels like it would be the right thing. But I have serenity knowing that it's not, and so that gives me the power not to have to meddle. There are times where I'll do something and I'll think, if you asked me, I'd say, oh, it's 100% God's will. The challenge for me is my disease in my own head sounds like God a lot of the time. I think it's God. And so sometimes I often will say, I don't know what God looks like. And I know what God sounds like. And God for me sounds like this a lot of the time because God, I picture God just going, oh, Jen, you make this so hard on yourself. It doesn't need to be this hard. Sometimes for me, I follow what I think is God's will, and it turns out it's Jen's will. And sometimes that looks like a 2x4 to the face, and that's okay. I don't think it's God standing there swinging the 2x4. I think God would prefer me to have followed God's will in the first place and have avoided the 2x4. But sometimes I need the 2x4. That's the nature of the beast that is me and my disease. So I don't always know, but I more often than not know because it's just how it sits with me. It sits with me in a way that allows me to feel serene even when I don't necessarily like it, but I have serenity around it.
Hey, Rico 12 Spearheads. If our recovery resources have helped you, please consider a donation. Your financial support, as well as your word of mouth support, keeps Rico 12 running and reaching the man who is still sick. Donate today at rico12.com/support or check the show notes for PayPal and Venmo links. Every contribution helps carry the message. Thanks for being a Rico 12 Spearhead. That's really good. Thank you for walking through that. So, Jenn, you mentioned earlier, you said earlier on in life, you really hated the God word, the G word. You love the F word, but the G word was something that you ran away from because of, as you said, other people's perception, the God of others people's understanding. Talk to us a little bit about that evolution from the God of other people's understanding to the God of your current experience. What did that evolution kind of look like over a period of time?
For sure. So for me, I did not grow up in a religious or a spiritual household. What I knew of religion was bits and pieces that I, heard from friends, or I'd go to somebody's place of worship or whatever. But generally speaking, I didn't have a whole lot of God in my life. It just wasn't something that I was introduced to. Um, Growing up, as I got a little older, I came to really despise uh, despise what I viewed. And again, this is me and this is my perspective. It's not the reality of what was going on. I hated organized religion because to me it always seemed like somebody else has decided what God says you need to do and where you need to do it, when you need to do it, and you have to follow that in order to be okay within, the circle of that religion. So I really hated it. I used to I used to commute from where I lived into Toronto on the train, and so I decided I was going to pick up this 2,000-year-old book and start reading it cover to cover, which don't recommend. Not how it's meant to be read. Also, probably somebody who knows what they're talking about should take you through that much. Similarly to the big book, but I read it cover to cover, not really to learn about God, but to argue against it. And I'm embarrassed to say that, but that's what my arrogance, that's what my disease looked like. I looked at religion, which brought millions of people comfort, and decided I should prove it all wrong because I didn't like it. And I would argue about God with anybody. Oh yeah, prove it, right? I'm a science and math girl. Prove it. And then when I started, coming around the rooms of recovery, and I would sit in the AA meetings with my partner and daughter, and the Lord's Prayer, and I flat out, literally, would sit there like this, not bowing my head. I am not closing my eyes. I am not praying. Like what a jerk, But that, again, that was me and my disease. And my first sponsor was really wonderful because she said, you don't have to know what God is. You don't have to define God. If you do define God, you're probably wrong anyhow. All you need to recognize is, do you have the willingness to say there could be something? And for me, it took a while. It took a while. I hated the idea of God. I was going to write to the GSO for AA and let them know that if they meant higher power, why don't they change it to higher power? And I probably would have landed in Al-Anon a lot sooner because they would have written back and said, lady, there's a program you might want to check out. But I didn't. Thank God I didn't do that. But I slowly, and again, like without these steps, I don't think I ever would have gotten to a place where God was a real part of my life and not some outside idea. That's probably the greatest gift of these steps is bringing God to me, a personal relationship with God through my experience. And that started to look like, a willingness to see things, an awakening, to see things differently, to watch for God in my life, to seek God in my life, to recognize the God in me and recognize the God in you. Because for me, that second step proposition, God is either everything or else he is nothing. I truly have come to believe that. And so if God is everything, then God is in everyone. Then God is every experience, whether I deem it good or bad. And that changed so much, because if I have an experience and I look at it and I say, this is not a good experience, this is not how it should be, but I can see that there's God in this, then what is the gift and what is the lesson? And I seek that instead of seeking why this is so bad and why it shouldn't be, and seek to change that. And that's everything for me. It's changed everything. And the more I experience God, the more I experience God. You know what I mean? Like, it's this willingness to be open to it. God's already there. It's not too tough to find God when you start to seek God.
So, Jenn, I love how part of your story is that you're so grateful for the rooms, the open rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, for those open meetings that allow people who may not have a problem with alcohol to come in and learn and experience. I'm going to take just a little bit of liberty here and share a little personal experience on my end, and then see what your thoughts are on that, if it's anything similar. I also am not. Alcohol isn't part of my disease. In fact, I've never even had a beer in my life. I don't even know what that's like, gratefully, because I think I'd be a raging alcoholic otherwise. But my experience in recovery is such that I have these contacts with so many different people from different addictions, backgrounds, afflictions, everywhere else, and I've had several occasions where somebody here local came to me and said, "Hey, Justin, I'm dying with alcohol." And I am so excited to say, hey, let's go to a group. I know some open AA meetings that I'm happy to go into. They're happy to have me come into, and we can make this happen. And I get to introduce them into the world of Alcoholics Anonymous with that. I don't have to say, hey, I'm not allowed in there. I can say, hey, come with me. Let's go do this. And that has been so helpful to me and to other people. Talk to me a little bit about, do you have any other thoughts or comments on that?
Oh, I love that. And I wish everybody would make use of that, not just of open AA, but if you're alcoholic, go to an open Al-Anon meeting, go to an open narcotics meeting, whatever, go to any other 12-step recovery, because to me, the broader and deeper our recovery, the more we benefit, but the more people around us benefit as well. For me, like, I look at traditions 11 and 12 when I go to meetings. My husband and my daughter and I, when we go to a meeting together, we don't go to a meeting together. We may pull up together in the parking lot, but as soon as we're out of the car, he's not my husband. He's just another sick person, a bum in a seat. And for me, what I tend to do at any meeting, I mean, whether I am there to learn, I would say I'm there to learn at any meeting. But I believe my primary purpose is to fit myself to be of maximum usefulness. And so how do I do that? Well, I wait at the back of the room almost always, and I look for somebody who's sitting by themselves, whether I recognize them or not, because it's a disease of isolation, right? So if I can go and sit beside somebody, and maybe that's the first person that has made them feel seen all day, then I believe, I am being who God would have me be. I always introduce myself if I don't know that person. And I speak openly about being in Al-Anon, because if I can then be useful, I mean, for every alcoholic, they typically are surrounded by a bunch of people who could use Al-Anon. But much like you, and I'm grateful. Our family, we are agreed upon being very open in recovery, and we've had the benefit of being able to help others. We've had our kids' friends. We have 7 kids, a blended family, and with 7 kids, we've had our kids' friends come to us and say, I think I'm an alcoholic. Can I talk to my husband? Or I think my parent is an alcoholic. Can I talk to you, meaning me? We've had, neighbors come and talk to us. And it's been a remarkable thing to be able to expand, from somebody who didn't know a whole lot about alcoholism, even though I grew up in an alcoholic home. I didn't understand it back then. To be able to try to be useful in the rooms, but also to go into a room, set aside what I think I know, and listen for me in every story. And that's why, like, for me, the big book it's how I sponsor. I'm not an alcoholic, but it's my story in there. And so when I can go into a room and listen to a speaker, they may be doing a drunkalog, and I don't necessarily have that, but I sure have a think a log, a control a log. Like, I have all of that. And so when I get out of the weeds where my disease wants me to differentiate from and say, no, that's not me, and I seek to see where it is me, any meeting is useful to me. Any person is somebody that I can identify with. And I seek to do that both mentally, spiritually, but also physically by placing myself next to somebody on purpose.
Yeah, thank you, Jenn. Just a couple more wrap-up questions. First one, your topic, having had a spiritual awakening. If you go back 7, 10, 12 years, whatever it was, and look at yourself then versus now, well, let's just say, are there people in your lives who have said, holy cow, who you are is completely different. You have definitely had a spiritual awakening. And how do you respond to that when somebody tells you that?
Definitely. My daughter, actually, we were talking the other day, and she was saying, I can't believe how angry you used to be all of the time and how that's not you anymore. She didn't, sort of say what a spiritual awakening, but that is what it is, right? So for sure, people absolutely, I would say, at least the people in my intimate life, recognize that about me. You asked me a second part of that question. I've completely forgotten it. Hopefully you remember, or maybe you've forgotten it.
Yeah, I think you covered it. That's good stuff.
Okay, well, there
Yeah,
you go.
I don't remember. Very good. So, final question. Do you have any final words of wisdom for us before we close this up?
Stay in the middle of this stuff. Get a sponsor. Be a sponsor. It's life changing. Work these steps, all 12 of them, not just the ones that you're comfortable with or that you want to do. I can't express how much this program has changed my life. And for me, the fellowship is beautiful. Sitting in a meeting with people who understand what you're going through, there's so much relief in that. And that's an amazing thing. But if you want recovery, the program is those steps. Get a sponsor, be a sponsor. It will absolutely change your life.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Jenn, for an amazing RICO 12 speaker meeting. That was awesome. Loved your energy, loved your message. Good stuff. It lifted me today. If you in the live audience or out there in the podcast world had a question that we weren't able to get to or have one you'd like to send in, please consider joining our WhatsApp community. You can send me an email at rico12pod@gmail.com to get there in the WhatsApp community. Also, Jenn, if somebody would like to get in contact with you and they email me, are you okay if I share your email with them and they can get in contact with you that way?
Yeah, absolutely, Justin. Thanks so much.
Perfect. So if you'd like to do that, send me an email at rico12pod@gmail.com. All right. And if you haven't done so yet, please consider rating and reviewing the podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you listen there, it's a powerful way to work step 12 and share recovery with others. Come back next week for another great speaker, Ashley C. She's in our live audience today. Happy to have her here. She's also a first-time RICO 12 speaker. And her topic next week will be abandon, not surrender. I'm just excited to hear from her next week. We do continue to schedule speakers out over the next few months. So if your higher power is putting a topic on your heart, reach out to me. We'll get you scheduled and get you up here. Love to hear your message, just like we heard from Jenn today. Let's close out today with the Thomas Merton prayer that Jenn will launch us off with.
Thanks, Justin. And again, thank you so much for your service. All right, the Thomas Merton prayer. My Lord God, I have no idea where I am going. I do not see the road ahead of me. I cannot know for certain where it will end. nor do I really know myself. And the fact that I think I am following your will does not mean that I am actually doing so. But I believe that the desire to please you does in fact please you. And I hope that I have that desire in all that I am doing. I hope that I will never do anything apart from that desire. And I know that if I do this, you will lead me by the right road, though I may know nothing about it. Therefore will I trust you always, though I may seem to be lost and in the shadow of death. I will not fear, for you are ever with me, and you will never leave me to face my perils alone.
Amen. Thank you, Jenn. Everybody remember, there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find God now. Keep coming back. And when you do, come all the way in, sit all the way down. Let's trudge this road of happy destiny together. Work it. You are worth it.
I feel that I'm lucky to have made it at all through the complicated maze. I did it all to myself, but finally left behind that constant pain. What more can I do but to show up here each day? I'd like you to be proud of me, but first I need to be proud of myself. So I'm taking back my heart, taking back my heart this time. Taking back my heart, taking back my heart this time. What's so damn attractive about some medicated haze? I've lied to myself, it feels like 1,000 times. I was going through some messed up passing phase. What more can I do than get up, get over, find a better way? Someday I'll be proud of me. I'll never give up on myself again. So I'm taking back my heart, I'm taking back my heart this time. I'm taking back my heart, I'm taking back my heart this time. Taking back my heart, I'm taking back my heart this time. So I'm taking back my heart, taking back my heart this time. Ba 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 da, ba 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 da, ba ba da ba da, ba 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 da, ba 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 da.